Hey everyone, Tin Man here, and today I have a guide to proper gold management in Dota Underlords. This guide is aimed at beginner and intermediate players who want to learn the proper way to earn, save, and spend their gold. But I think that some more advanced players may find this guide useful as well. We'll be talking about how to earn gold as well as the optimal strategies for using gold on gaining interest, buying units, leveling up at optimal times, and using your rerolls efficiently. For those of you who have watched my previous guide on gold management, link in the description below, some of this will be recap, but there will also be some new material specifically in regards to the updates to the XP and leveling system. To start, let's make sure we're all on the same page in regards to how the gold system works in Dota Underlords. Outside of the first 4 rounds, you'll receive 5 gold every round as a baseline, plus 1 additional if you won the previous round of combat, plus up to 4 additional gold if you're on a win streak, which will reset after 8 wins in a row, plus up to 2 additional gold if you're on a losing streak with no resets, plus up to 5 gold in the form of interest, 1 for each 10 gold that you have saved up, and then any additional earned from items or other effects. If you lose the round, you're also given a free reroll for the next round, which I'll discuss a bit later. Combat rounds against neutral waves are a bit different. You will gain your base 5 gold plus any interest, as well as the item from the creep round, but you'll not gain any gold from winning, or from win or loss streaks, or you won't get a reroll if you lose. These numbers are broken down on screen when you gain income at the start of the round, as shown here. Just looking at these numbers alone can tell us some interesting strategic information. First, you can consider the win or loss bonuses to be somewhat unreliable, since you cannot guarantee the result of any given combat round. But you can consider interest to be a bit more reliable, since you have control over how much of your gold to spend and how much to save up for interest. This interest can stack up to 5 extra gold per round, which is more than the other sources, so it should be a priority every game to focus on reliably establishing interest to maximize your gold income. Second, winning rounds will generally get you more gold income. You get 1 bonus for the win, plus up to 4 bonus if you're on a win streak, and of course you won't take damage if you win the round. In some cases though, losing the round may be advantageous. You can continue a loss streak, which may earn more gold right now than flipping a losing streak into a single win. It will also grant you a free reroll, which would normally cost you 2 gold to use. Of course, by the end of the game, you want to be winning combat rounds, but there are strategic reasons to want to lose the rounds as well, especially early on. There are 4 ways to utilize your gold. You can save it to accumulate interest, spend it on buying units, you can also spend it to level up, or to reroll the shop of available units to purchase. Finding the balance between these 4 uses is critical to improving as a player. While I can't cover every possible situation here, I want to talk about the general concepts and guidelines for each of these 4 uses and how they interact with each other. First up is saving your gold for interest. As mentioned before, interest is the single most reliable way to increase your gold income, and it can be quite a substantial increase as well, doubling your baseline gold per turn. The players who earn the most gold will more often than not be the ones who do the best in the game, so more gold means more options and a stronger board, so ensuring that you are maximizing your interest is the first key step in that process. One key thing about interest is knowing when it is calculated. Currently the system is a little bit weird. Your total gold for interest purposes is calculated as soon as combat starts on a round. The game will snapshot your gold at the moment that the fight starts. Regardless of what happens during the round, your interest is locked in. During combat, you can buy and sell units, reroll or level up, but your interest is already locked in and nothing you can do will affect it in any way. There's a peculiar thing about this though. Remember when I said that you get 1 bonus gold for winning combat on a round? Well, it turns out that the game considers that 1 bonus gold as part of your gold total when calculating interest, but does not actually award that 1 to you until the start of the next round with the rest of your income. This leads to a strategy called X9ing, where you strategically get your gold to some level of 9, like 9, 19, 29, etc., and you're hoping that you will win the round and collect the increased interest level. If you're at 19 gold at the start of the round and you win, you'll gain 2 gold of interest, regardless if you buy or sell units during combat. You may choose to do this when you don't have any units you want to sell off to increase your gold total, or when you think that you're strong enough that you'll likely win the round anyway, so you take the higher risk, higher reward strategy of keeping an extra unit on your bench rather than selling it off. Other than that, it's a little hard to talk about optimal interest strategy without also discussing the other ways that you'll be spending your gold. As we discuss the other 3 uses, you want to always keep it in the back of your mind, what is the interest cost of these actions? Every time you buy a unit that drops you below a multiple of 10 gold, every time you reroll or level up, it will potentially decrease the interest income. meaning that the real cost of those actions are much more than they may seem. Interest is like an opportunity cost. Every other action must, to some extent, be weighed against gaining more interest. When we're above 50 gold, however, the interest is capped out, so you can freely spend that gold above 50 without worrying about the opportunity cost. Next up is buying units. The most common way you're going to be spending gold is to buy units. Every unit in the shop costs between 1 and 5 gold, and you'll probably end up spending around 1 to 200 gold on units on the board throughout the game. The early game is where buying units is the most impactful. By the time you get to the late game, you're pretty sure you know exactly which units to buy, that is, units that you have on board and need to upgrade, or very specific pieces to complete an alliance. But in the early game, there are many more options available to you and many more routes to take. Remember that all units bought from the shop can be sold back for the same price, as long as you don't upgrade them up to 2-star. Then you won't get as much when you spend as you spent when you sell it off, other than for the tier 1 units. This means that you can buy up all the units from the shop every turn, and then sell them off later when you determine you no longer need them, and not lose any gold in the process. This will keep your options open. If you buy a bunch of units one turn, and then you have another copy of them the next turn in the new shop, you can keep the pair and then sell off the rest. But by having all those extras in the first place, you make it more likely to find a pair for at least one of them. You can also use your board at the end of combat to increase your bench size temporarily. This is commonly referred to as overflowing, since you overflow your bench and simply place the excess units on the board. You will have to sell off the units or combine them into higher star units before the next combat phase starts, though, in order to get back to the appropriate limit of units. Here's an example of this in action. As units are resetting from the end of combat, you can click and drag units from the shop onto your board, as we're doing with Axe and Sniper here. Then, after the shop refreshes, if we now determine that we no longer want those units, you can simply sell them off at the same price and you haven't lost anything. Regardless of which units you're buying, you must consider buying them in the context of your interest. Any units that you hold on your bench or even on your board are essentially potential gold that could be gaining you that interest. If a total of 10 gold worth of units are on your bench, it's costing you 1 gold per turn to keep them there, rather than selling them off. That interest could then earn you more interest later down the line, compounding over the course of the game. For some units, like say a second copy of a key unit on your board who you want to get to 2-star, or perhaps the unit that you want to add in next when you level up, this is fine to keep on your bench. But if you have some speculative units, units that you bought to keep your options open, or you're not sure that you're going to ever use them, it may be wise to just sell them off when they can get you your gold up to a multiple of 10 for more interest. The precise balance of this, when it makes more sense to keep them and what makes sense to sell off for interest, will come with experience, and it varies heavily based on the situation. But as long as you're thinking in terms of, does this unit on my bench justify lost interest, then you're going to be on the right track. Some good benchmarks for accumulating interest are 10 gold on round 6, 20 gold on rounds 8 or 9, and then getting up to 50 for the maximum interest around rounds 13 through 16. In this example, I'm at 16 gold, and if I sell off 4 gold worth of units, I can get up to 20 gold, one of those benchmarks we talked about earlier here on round 8. I will sell Timbersaw, Enchantress, and Tiny. The first two we have no pairs of, and for Tiny, we already have a 2-star Tiny on board. Going for a 3-star unit is a nice idea, but this early on, I would rather keep Ogre Magi, Drow Ranger, and Luna, because between our bench and our shop, we have pairs of each of them. Keeping pairs like this makes it more likely to find upgraded units, which are going to be more impactful in the early game. We can then sell those units to get up to 20 gold, and then after combat begins and our interest has locked in, we can buy the units that we want from the shop while still getting the 2 gold of interest for having 20 gold at the start of combat. The last thing to note about buying units is the optimal timing. Remember that interest locks in at the start of combat, meaning that any gold you spend during a combat round will not affect your interest, as we saw in that example. In general, you want to buy units during combat and then sell them off during the preparation phase. This way you can lock in as much interest as possible and still buy the units that you want. Sometimes, though, you'll have an upgrade available in your shop, your third copy of a unit to get it to 2-star, for instance, and in those cases, it would make sense to buy it right away before combat starts to ensure that you have the most powerful board possible. But if it will cost you interest by dropping you below a threshold of 10 gold, you have to weigh the value of that upgraded unit for this one round versus getting it next round instead and gaining more gold for interest right now on this turn. Other than buying units, you can also spend your gold to level up. Leveling up has a number of advantages. First, you get to use more units on the board, which increases the number of alliances you can complete and also increases your damage output, making you more likely to win combat rounds. Secondly, it will also change the unit odds of what shows up in your shop. As you level up, the chances to get a higher tier unit increases, while the chances of the lower tier units decreases. While this may seem like a strict upgrade, there are times when leveling up is not as advantageous as it looks. Because if you are looking for a specific tier of units, sometimes those lower tiers will decrease as you level up. Notably, leveling up to 6 from level 5 will decrease your odds of tier 2 units from 35% down to 30, and then leveling up from 8 to 9 will decrease the odds of tier 3 units from 35 down to 30%. So if you're looking to get one of those units in those tiers up to 3-star, you have to consider that trade-off when deciding to level up. In order to level up, you will spend 5 XP or spend 5 gold to get 5 XP. You can do this at any time and any number of times in a row, no limit. Other than buying XP with gold, you'll naturally gain 1 XP per round. So here's a chart of all the XP required to level from each level to the next. Notice that they're all going to be multiples of 5 except for the early 4 rounds, which you achieve just naturally by playing the game for the opening couple of rounds. And since you gain the 1 XP per turn, there'll be certain turns where it's naturally more efficient to level up, where buying 5 XP will exactly hit the next level up threshold and you're not overspending. Those efficient rounds are on rounds 6, 11, 16, 21, and then every 5 rounds from then on. Other than round 6, these are directly after neutral creep rounds, so they're pretty easy to remember. Most of the time, you want to spend your gold and to level up on these rounds, or decide to wait until the next optimal round to level up. The exception is, of course, when you're very low on life total and you just need to level up right away to avoid being eliminated. When you want to level up, you can pre-level. That is, spend your gold during the combat of the round before you want to level up. So if you're leveling up on round 16, you want to spend your gold to pump your experience up to 19 of 20 here, and then you'll naturally hit level 7 on round 16 as you go to the next round. This will let you get units in your shop on round 16 at the better odds of level 7 compared to the level 6 odds. Here are some of the common level up timings. If you have a good early game and think that you may be able to get a winning streak, some players may level up to 4 on round 4 or 5, which then also leads to level 5 on round 6. If you're going for an early losing streak, you can avoid leveling up until round 11 or later, but in most cases you'll want to level up to 5 on round 6. Most players, except those on a losing streak once again, will level up to 6 on round 11. By round 16, almost everyone should level up to level 7, and if you're really far ahead and want to push an advantage, you may consider going to level 8 sometime between rounds 16 and 21. If you're not too far ahead though, leveling up to 8 on round 21 is generally a good timing. Leveling up to 9 and 10 are much more variable. Some builds that want to get lots of 3-star units, like assassins or knights, will want to stay at level 8 for a longer time to get better rates on those tier 3 units. Other builds, which are more heavily focused on getting the 4 and 5 cost units, like warriors or possibly mages, will want to level up to 9 as soon as possible. The latest patch did increase the gold cost to level up to 9, so in most cases, even those who want to rush up to level 9 won't be leveling up until around round 23 or later. While round 23 is not a very efficient timing, it is used because they want to get those better odds of the tier 4 and 5 units faster, but if they level up on round 21, they'd be left with no gold to get interest with, and if they wait till round 26, they lose the few rounds of the better unit odds, which may be critical in that time frame. Level 10 only really comes much later in the game, often on round 31 or later, and only if you're far enough ahead in terms of life total and gold totals that you know you're going to be fighting for a first or second place spot. If you're too far behind on life total, then spending that gold on a level up is not as efficient as rerolling a lot to find the upgrades to maximize your power. maximize your power at levels 8 and 9 instead. If you have to remember that leveling up to 9 or 10 naturally will cost you 20 or more rerolls, plus unit buys. So if you're more likely to find upgrades in your composition with that many rerolls, it's better to just reroll rather than level up to 10. Speaking of rerolls, they are the last way of spending your gold. And we'll discuss this one last because it's the last one that you should be using in the game. One of the most common mistakes of newer players is using rerolls too early. I do not mean the free rerolls, which must be used on the turn they're awarded, but actually paying 2 gold for a reroll before you hit level 7 or 8 is generally considered a mistake. Let's take a moment to discuss the optimal free reroll usage though, because it's not as straightforward as it may seem. Yes, you do need to use it the round that you get it, because it does not carry over, but the exact timing can be a bit tricky. On one hand, you want to use it before combat for the best chance of finding a unit upgrade. This can help you to get a unit to 2-star and help to turn around a losing composition into a winning one. But on the other hand, you may want to buy a unit from the shop first before rerolling. If buying that unit will drop you below an interest threshold, it may be better to wait until combat starts and then buy the unit that you want and then reroll after your interest has locked in for the round during combat. This may lead to your team being weaker for one round in exchange for more gold, but early on in the game, your life total is not that important, but maximizing your gold income is crucial. Regular rerolls are generally reserved for the later stages of the game, once you've leveled up to level 7 or 8, or even later if you are already winning and want to push quickly to level 9. There's an inverse relationship between your life total and the amount of rerolls you should be using. The higher in life total that you are, the more likely you should be saving and leveling up rather than rerolling. If you are losing rounds and your health total is dropping, rerolling to find key upgrades is going to be the most beneficial to stop the bleeding. Once you get to a good level for your composition, then you can start to reroll if there are some excess upgrades that you're close to. Generally, you want to reroll just your gold in excess of 50 gold each round and avoid dropping below the maximum interest threshold possible. If you're losing hard though, it can be correct to roll more, but if you're doing alright, try to maximize your interest for the best long-term success. Once you've found a few upgrades and stabilized your board, you need to think about how to balance rolling for the harder to find upgrades with leveling up to add another unit and then increase your odds of the higher tier units. You don't need to have your board fully upgraded to decide to level up, just mostly upgraded, to the point where you will benefit more from leveling than rerolling further. If you are dropping too low on life total, generally below 35%, you may want to go all in and spend all of your gold, either leveling up or rerolling, or both, because you're just a few lost rounds away from being eliminated. If you have an Aegis of the Immortal, you can delay this all in by a bit because you know you can't get eliminated while you still have an Aegis, but be careful to not get eliminated while you still have lots of gold. You can't take it with you to the next game. This meme is from Teamfight Tactics, but it is still relevant here. You should probably not wait until you're at 1 health to start rerolling. If you start rerolling earlier than 1 health, you can avoid losing that life in the first place. There are some times when it's correct to reroll in the early game, even with high life totals, but those are very specific situations where the reroll does not cost you interest, you're on a win streak, and are close to several different upgrades. That's more of an advanced concept that I can cover in depth another time. So for most beginner and intermediate players, the general advice is to level up first and don't reroll until you hit a higher level, generally 7, 8, or 9. The last topic to consider when rerolling is the blacklisting mechanic. This mechanic is not really spelled out anywhere in the game, so it's definitely not obvious to newer players. But whenever you manually reroll the shop, either with a free reroll or by paying 2 gold, any unit that was in the previous shop will not appear in the refreshed one. In this example, Chaos Knight, Treant, Lifestealer, and Puck will not appear in the new shop, as we see. When you're about to reroll, you should leave in the shop any units that you do not want, which will then increase the odds of finding the units that you do want. In contrast, at the start of the round, at the end of the round, before the shop naturally refreshes, you can buy all of the remaining units in the shop to keep your options open because blacklisting does not apply when the shop naturally refreshes at the start of the round. There are also some cases where it's correct to reroll because there are so many units of a certain cost in the shop that you want to reroll in order to blacklist them to increase the odds of finding the unit you do want. But once again, that's another more advanced topic that is a rather corner case scenario. So I know that was a lot to take in, but mastering these fundamentals of gold management can really help to win you games. Of course, every rule has its exception, some of which I alluded to here in this video. So take these as more of guidelines to help craft your decision-making process, recognizing that every situation is different. When you see a streamer or YouTuber deviate from these guidelines, ask yourself, or them, why did they do that? Please make sure to like and subscribe. You can also follow me over on Twitch, where I stream almost daily. A big thanks to all my Patreon supporters. If you like content like this and want to help me make more of it, please consider supporting me over at patreon.com/tinman354. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.